Hey everyone, this is Lendon. Welcome back to a new action-packed tutorial from ActionVFX.com. In this episode, we'll go over this flamethrower shot, and well, first off, we all know this is going to be fun because there's fire and glow involved, so just saying. Second off, we'll be using these fireball elements from ActionVFX.com. And third off, well, there actually is no third off, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so apparently there's some camera movement, so let's go ahead and track the scene first of all. We'll right click, we have these tracking options here, but we're going to use Mocha Pro, a really good tracking option for After Effects called Mocha Pro. And this is a third-party plugin, so you guys check out the description to see where you can download this at. We'll go ahead and apply this to the footage, and we'll select this Mocha icon. Now we always want to be in full resolution before we do that, so go ahead and select the icon there. Okay, and off the bat, we'll go ahead and grab our X-Spline layer tool is what it's called, and we'll select this area with some contrasted detail so it can track really well. And we'll do position, scale, and rotation. Let's go ahead and track forward with this button here. And just like one of those techniques we covered in the last tutorial, we're allowed to change the shape of this mask without actually changing the transform data. So don't be afraid to pause and change your mask whenever you need to, and just continue the forward track. Okay, so that should be all the tracking we need for this shot. What we'll do is hit export tracking data, and for the format we'll choose After Effects transform data, position, scale, and rotation. Let's hit copy to clipboard, X out of this, hit save, and what I'll do is go ahead and create a new null object. Control-Shift-Y, we'll call this tracking. And I'll go to the very first frame, that's important, and we'll hit Control-V, and that'll paste all of our keyframe data. Okay, so that should be a pretty solid track. Okay, so I guess we're ready to go ahead and start compositing the flamethrower fire elements. So the first one I'm dragging is this large flamethrower, and the first thing I want to do is grab the anchor point and move it to the right spot. So we'll click the pan behind tool, we'll move the anchor point to the kind of the origin of the flame there, and I'll go ahead and position it correctly right there, and let's scale it up. So let's turn the scale up till it looks about right. So maybe about like that. There is a 4K element for this. All these come in 4K, but this is just a 2K element. Should work fine for this shot. So we could go ahead and parent this fire element to the tracking. So we'll do that here with the pick whip. But the problem is it follows the scene alright, but it doesn't necessarily follow his gun, and we kind of want this element to follow the motion of the flamethrower. Okay, so how we're going to do this is create a new null object, and we'll call this gun motion. And what we'll do is apply this gun motion null object to the tracking. And come back here towards the beginning and position this gun motion null object. And hit P, add a keyframe to the position, and we'll move forward to the end of the clip. And we'll reposition this gun motion null object. So now it's going to follow the motion of the camera since it's attached to the tracking, but also it's going to follow the general motion of the flamethrower. So now that we're finished with that, we'll go ahead and parent the flamethrower to the gun motion null object. Okay, so it follows the motion of the flamethrower, but also the motion of the camera. So that's the way to win both ways. So let's kind of find the point in time when the flamethrower is supposed to come on, and you can see here that actually a real light shines. They have a big light that is really going to help the look of the scene, because right when this flamethrower element comes in, there's going to be a light that comes on to help it look like the fire is lighting up the environment. So right when that light comes on is when we want to begin the flamethrower element. So maybe right here. And first off, we want to speed this stock footage up because it's too slow. So we'll do time stretch, and we'll do about 50, so it does twice as fast. And we'll see if this flame element dies out at the right time. So yeah, right when that light goes away. Okay, so off the bat we have a little problem here. There's this leftover flame, and we don't need that. So let's go ahead and right click, pre-compose, leave all attributes, and nothing's really going to change except we can go in here and make some adjustments to the stock footage. So what I want to do is get rid of this little last bit of fire here. So I'll create actually a black solid, call this, and I'll apply a mask to this layer, and I'll kind of animate it such that it follows the motion correctly. Okay, that looks great. Let's go ahead and turn it on. And the reason why I did a black solid rather than just applying a mask to this footage layer is because I like to add a little turbulence to the edge. So we'll add an effect called turbulent displace and apply this to that black solid, and turn the complexity up mostly, and turn the size down. Okay. So that should really help the edge blend naturally with the fire. Okay, and if you don't want that black splotch left there, which you probably don't, we'll go to the mode and hit Silhouette Alpha. Okay, so let's go back to our main comp. And everything's looking pretty good so far, but what we're going to do is blend with this another smaller flamethrower element, and that's going to help kind of the beginning part look better here, and make the flame look a little fuller. So we'll grab this small flamethrower element, and the main thing is position it correctly in time. So I'll right click, transform, flip horizontal like that, and position the anchor point, grab the pan behind tool. Okay, so what I'll do now is make it kind of come in right when the fire kind of explodes out. So it'll kind of be as though this small flame is kind of causing this explosion to happen here. So we'll turn on that small flame and position it correctly in space and times. And also what I'd like to do is, since we had to scale up this large flame, the small fire looks much better quality. So this shouldn't be an issue if you're using the 4K footage, but what we'll do is add a Gaussian blur to this small element. So maybe for the blurriness we'll do about 3. Okay, so we're going to go over a few techniques that really help two fire elements like this blend together. I think this is really cool. Check this out. Let's go to the small flamethrower element. We'll put it below the large flame, and for the track matte of the small flame we'll do alpha inverted. So the small flame will not exist where the large flame is. Let's go ahead and turn the large flame back on, and you can see here it kind of blends much better than before. I think that looks pretty sweet. So now we're going to pre-compose these two elements together, but I'd like to make a duplicate of the tracking so we'll have a copy of it if we ever need it. So let's go ahead and pre-compose these 4 elements along with the tracking so it still has that motion. We'll call this Flame 01. And now it's time that we go ahead and start working on the visuals of this fire. So this is kind of the fun part. So, I mean, we've covered techniques like this in other tutorials before, but we'll have fun just kind of flying through it again. So there's actually transparency in these flames. So the first thing I'd like to do before I start making adjustments is to add a solid composite effect. So we'll type that in, solid composite, and we'll apply this to the flames. Like this black. Now what I like to do is add an exposure effect, and we're going to increase the exposure just before we blow out the highlights too much. So maybe something kind of like that, so before after. And now I guess we're ready to add our first glow effect. So we'll type in glow, add this to the flame element, and we'll turn the glow radius maybe to 250, and the glow threshold can be down a lot, maybe 25, so it gets most of those colors. And it's usually a good idea to turn your glow operation to screen. Okay, we do see some problems with the colors over here, and it looks a little too intense. But what we're going to do is go to the glow colors and do colors A and B so we can kind of define our own custom colors. And the color looping should be this top option here, A is greater than B. Okay, so we can go down here, make the color B more of an orangish red, and color A can be more of a yellow, brighter color. Okay, that looks pretty good. We'll duplicate the glow, and this will be a more broad, spread out glow. We'll turn it to maybe 800 or so for the glow radius. So yeah, that looks pretty great. And I usually like to add one last glow, and this is really gonna just bring out those highlights, but sometimes we can have some problems over here on the edges. You can fix that by adding another solid composite effect after the second glow. Okay, we'll make this black. And we'll turn the glow radius up to about 100, so it's a pretty tight glow. It's just going to get those highlights, so we'll turn the glow threshold all the way up to 100, like I said, so it gets just those highlights. And the glow operation can also be screen. Okay, looks pretty good. It really just kind of blends those highlights in. And to blend this flame in with the footage, what we can do is turn the operation of the layer to screen, and so it's going to blend in really well. Okay, so it's looking really nice, but I think it looks a little bit too saturated. So here's how we'll fix this. Just select the flame layer, and we'll type in a tint effect. Now, tint is a nice effect for just bringing down saturation. So we can either put it before or after the glow. Now, if we put it after the glow, it's going to take down the saturation of the glow along with the fire. We can kind of adjust this, bring the amount to tint down like that. Or we can put this before the glow and just leave the glow saturated, and we can turn down the saturation of the flames themselves. Okay, so maybe we'll do that, and also just put a tint after the glows and do a subtle adjustment here as well, so you can kind of see a before and after, so it looks more realistic when you take down that saturation. We also have a grade layer here, and it's always a good idea to do that just to kind of have a preview of how your effect's going to look once the footage is graded. Alright, so at this point we need to think about motion blur. So like I said, these stock footage elements are shot in really high quality at a really fast shutter speed, so there's not really much motion blur going on here, and it's really a good idea to add motion blur in post just to make them look a little more natural. So we're going to be using a plugin called Real Smart Motion Blur. This is a third-party plugin. If you're watching this from the ActionVFX YouTube channel, we'll have a link in the description where you can get this plugin. But how we're going to do this is apply Real Smart Motion Blur just after the solid composite effect. And this plugin is really amazing. Just like the title says, it's really smart about how it applies motion blur to your footage. And of course, we can adjust the motion sensitivity and the blur amount. And how this works is pretty self-explanatory. So there we go, we got some nice motion blur. Now we can either apply this to the composition, both flames at once, or we can go in here and apply it to each of these stock footage elements individually, and that would probably be a little more safe to do it that way, but it's a little quicker and it'll render a little bit faster if we just apply the Real Smart Motion Blur to the whole composition at once. Real Smart Motion Blur always does a really good job. Okay, looking really nice. So we have a few last adjustments we need to make to just make this scene look really nice. The first thing I like to do is add some lens dirt, and this is really important for scenes like this when we have kind of a dark environment with some bright fire kind of comes in. We need to add some lens dirt, so this is really going to really help the scene when we add that lens dirt. So at ActionVFX.com, in the free section, you can download some nice lens dirt elements. First off, I'm going to scale this down, so transform, maybe I'll do fit to comp width. And I might want to flip this, so transform, flip vertical. I just think that fits the scene a little better. And I'm just going to mask out a few sections of this element. I'll do this pretty randomly. Yeah, maybe something like that. It doesn't have to be too orderly, just pretty random. And then we'll click F for feather and just start applying a lot of feather. So maybe over 1,000 pixels of feather if you're in the new version of After Effects where we're able to do that. So we just apply a lot of feather. We'll turn the blending mode to screen, and we'll apply a tint effect just to give these elements some color. Okay, looks nice. Now we just need to animate the opacity of this lens dirt element. So right when the fire is pretty bright, we'll leave it at 100% opacity. And then back here when the fire element first comes in, we need to turn the opacity all the way down. Okay, it's also important to kind of make this opacity flicker a little bit, and there's a really nice method for doing this, and we're going to do this with expression. So we'll hold alternate and click the stopwatch of the opacity parameter. Okay, so essentially what we're going to do is multiply the opacity value by a wiggling value. So it's just going to wiggle the opacity value altogether. So what we're going to do is first make a variable called just v, any random letter, and we'll set v equal to just like a wiggling value. So to do this, we'll type in wiggle, and we got to set the frequency and amplitude. So for the frequency, we'll do about 7, and for the amplitude, let's do about 0.4, something like that. And what we need to do is minus value, because this wiggle expression actually stores the value inside of it, so we got a minus value to extract the current opacity value. And then we need to do plus 0.5 just to get it out of the negatives. And let's end it with a semicolon. Then let's do value, and then we'll multiply this times that variable v we just created. And so it's just going to multiply the opacity value by a wiggling expression. So let's go ahead and view this expression so we can kind of see what's going on here. Now it wiggles a little bit. We can change the frequency or whatever and see what it does. Looks pretty cool, and that's just going to make those Lensder elements flicker. Okay, I like that. Made some adjustments to the expression down here. So there's a couple more things we need to do. First off, I'd like to brighten up the scene a little more as this flame element kind of flares out. So let's maybe create an adjustment layer above the footage, and we'll call it whatever you want, global brightness, doesn't matter. And let's go to our effects and presets and add a curves effect. So start out with the RGB, and let's just lift this up and maybe add a little bit of contrast so it looks kind of natural. Let's go to the reds, bring that up a little bit, and also the blues, bring that down. Before, after, I think it looks much better. And let's animate the opacity kind of the same way we animated the Lensder opacity. What we can do is just click it, Control C, and that'll copy both the keyframes and the expression. Let's go to the first keyframe and hit Control V on the global brightness opacity. Looks pretty sweet. And one thing that's kind of nice to do along with the environmental brightness is to kind of brighten up the area on the ground that's near the flame. So what I'll do is just create another adjustment layer and call this ground brightness. And actually I'll parent this to the tracking. So we made a duplicate of this tracking in case we ever had to use it. So it actually did come in handy. So what I'll do is actually just scale this up so we don't have the layer boundaries coming into the screen. And what I'll do is just grab the circular mask tool and just kind of do like this. And put this curves effect on here and lift the brightness up. Okay, that should help. And then for the feather, what I like to do is unlink the two parameters here. And for the feather width, I like to do it a lot more than the feather height, so we kind of have that three-dimensional feel to it. Okay, and then just kind of animate the mask path. And we can also add some keyframes to the feather as well. And we also need to make this fade out, so just add a keyframe to the opacity as the flame fades out. Alrighty, now one thing we did have in the original version is some heat distortion. This is really important for a scene like this, but we're not going to cover it today because it's a bit of a lengthy process and I don't think we have the time. But heat distortion is definitely a tutorial in itself, so hopefully we can cover that soon in an ActionVFX tutorial. But just so we don't leave you guys in too big of a cliffhanger, we created this displacement map and use a displacement map effect, and also use a compound blur with its own blur map to generate some blurriness in the heat distortion. So maybe that'll help out a little bit. And also this guy does throw another flame here at the end. And so we'll just go over that real quick just to kind of recap all those techniques we learned. But we'll do a lot of time lapse so you guys don't have to kind of bear through the same things we've already learned. So let's go ahead and go in this flamethrower composition, and what we're going to do is basically just duplicate these two elements. We're going to reuse the same elements. Sometimes, depending on your shot, you may have to get different flamethrower elements if that's necessary, but sometimes it's nice when you get to reuse the same elements. So I can't really see where to position these since I can't see the footage. What I can do is just copy the footage, Control C, copy it, and then paste it here in this composition. And I can make this a guide layer so that it won't be visible in other compositions. And so the next thing to do is just position these correctly in time and also in the right space. And since we have these anchor points positioned correctly, we can just rotate and scale them really easily. And the one thing I'd like to do with these fire elements is make it interact with the environment, or make it interact with this person here. What I'll have to do is actually make a roto around this person, and I'll do this in Mocha, so I'll just select the Mocha icon. And tracking in Mocha is really nice. I'm just grabbing this layer tool here and making a roto around this person. And really the best thing about rotoing in Mocha is the fact that we can actually track these rotos, and if it begins to veer off a little bit, what we can do is just pause it, hold Z to zoom in, W to pan across, and we can just make adjustments, and these adjustments will interpolate between one keyframe to another. And one of the good things about tracking your rotos is that it follows the little bitty movements of the camera really nice. And also we're allowed to, interpolate just like regular After Effects masking. So if the camera kind of shakes a little bit, if we're just tracking forward, it's going to follow those exact motions of the camera. So I think you guys get the point. It's really nice to do rotoing here in Mocha. Now I'm pretty much finished with this roto. What I'll do is hit export shape data, and I'll scroll down here and do Mocha shape data for AE. Copy to clipboard, X out, hit save. What I'd actually like to do is duplicate the footage here, turn off guide layer. I'll go to the very beginning, hit Control V. Okay, and if I actually solo the layer here, I can see that it actually rotos out my footage. And what I really like to do is add a key cleaner effect. And this is just going to kind of search out and find the edges much better. Turn the alpha contrast up to about 25 and turn this down to about 5. Yeah, that's going to make it look a lot better. And what I'll do here is actually make a new black solid and attach this to the tracking. Kind of move this over here. And I'll grab my pen tool and draw a mask on this black solid, just something kind of like this. Okay, looks good. And then for this footage, I'll do alpha inverted so it doesn't exist where this black solid exists. We can add a little feather as well. So now what I'll do is drag this footage above these flame layers. Okay, and you can see what it's doing here. Grab the footage and actually do silhouette alpha. So it kind of cuts out the fire from that section. And we can see how this looks in the parent comp. And it does look really nice because it kind of looks like he's consumed in the fire, and also the glows kind of wrap around him as well. So everything is turning out perfect. Also, it can be a good idea to add turbulent displace to this black solid here. So we'll add turbulent displace, add a lot of complexity. And we can also animate the turbulent offset. And it also can be helpful to create another black solid. And we can furthermore just adjust the shape of this flame with this black solid. Just creating a mask like this and animating it. It's always good to add feather, like I said, turbulent displace, just to kind of match the fractal shape of the flame. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in today's tutorial. We went over some tracking in Mocha Pro. We learned how to make adjustments to the flame effects, like removing a section of the flame. We went over some tricks for blending two fire elements together. We went over glows and different flame color visual effects. We learned about the Real Smart Motion Blur plugin, really good. We showed how to add lens dirt, environmental brightness, ground brightness, and we went over some rotoing in Mocha also. That was definitely a very pleasant experience. We kind of went over some techniques about how you can control the shape of the flame with different black solids and turbulent display. So this has been really fun going through this tutorial. Hopefully you guys came out of this tutorial on fire with some new ideas and visual effects knowledge. Just don't physically catch on fire like this dude, alright? Alright, it's a figure of speech we're dealing with. Yeah, don't forget to stop by the website, download all the free stuff, start using that stock footage to really enhance those shots. Okay, that's it. My name is Lendon, and I'll see you in the next ActionVFX tutorial. By the way, we're all thinking the same thing right now.